Earlier this week I was thinking about how Antifa and how Black Lives Matter was formed during the Obama administration. These violent hate groups. And I know people have their difference of opinion when it comes to Black Lives Matter, and they're trying to bring awareness to the fact that many so-called Black Americans were being murdered by police. I completely understand that, and I completely understand that you should protest, you should fight back. I believe in fighting back. You can do so much. You can try to work with the system. You can even go through the court system, like the case with Trayvon Martin and George Zimmerman. But just think of the number of young black males and females that was murdered, unarmed, by police, and was able to walk. It was always a justified kill. So then they formed Black Lives Matter and they protest, but then Black Lives Matter became violent. It became somewhat of a hate group. And we learned later that Black Lives Matter was not really in favor of the so-called black community, because the only time it's activated is when a political agenda is in sight. So now we're dealing with Antifa, and just today they were protesting in Portland, and then there was a face-off between Antifa, a far left, and then you have now what they refer to as the far right. The far right was protesting. Then shows Antifa. They show up, and then there's a clash of ideas. This past week I posted a thought on Twitter, and I was saying that it's time for people to reset, to stop allowing so much negativity to fill your spirit. Negative propaganda is the next revolutionary population reduction. I'm going to repeat that. Negative propaganda is the next revolutionary population reduction. It's population reduction because not only there's been a decrease in childbirth, mainly because of the fact that so many so-called Americans are now considered to be LGBTQ, or you have the battle between the sexes, men against the women, or better yet, the women against the men. And then you have the political divisions, where everyone, or just about everyone, or a great number of people are now programmed and conditioned to hate and to be angry. To be angry at something they really don't know why they're angry at. They're just angry because of the programming and conditioning. Programming and conditioning is quite heavy. It's deep, because the person that's being programmed, conditioned, or brainwashed is not even aware that they've been completely and totally stripped of their rights. They've been completely and totally stripped of their rights to even have their own opinion, to think for themselves. So they allow the system to think for them. They allow the system to dictate how they feel. They're sleeping terror cells, because when the system is ready for them to promote a certain agenda, the system then puts information out there that would spark an emotion and a reaction to be angry, to resist, and to protest. So now, since there's so much hatred and animosity and murders that's taking place, many lives are being lost. That's not even including the abortions, even late-term abortions or post-abortions. It's a part of population reduction. And what's weird about that is that although they're promoting population reduction in the form of revolutionary negative propaganda, they're opening the borders for people that have different moral standards and principles than the people that live here. It's like they're setting their enemies against one another. They're allowing Muslims to come in that have a different mindset, that seem to believe that they can slay the infidels wherever they may find them. And then you have the Christians. And then you have the Mexicans, and then the terrorists, and those coming from other countries that in their hearts hate and despise and seek for the destruction of Babylon, of America. But yet they're opening the doors to this bitter animosity, which is going to lead to the death of many so-called Americans. Not just so-called Americans, but yet even the immigrants that they claim to love, the immigrants they claim to want to hate, but yet they don't realize that they are like sheep being led to the slaughter. Because once these illegals come in, then there's a battle that ensues, and then it sparks some type of emotion in the illegals, or what they refer to as undocumented immigrants. It creates hostility and jealousy among those citizens that's here in this country. So when those undocumented immigrants come in and they're able to receive rights that the citizens are not allowed to have, or they refuse to help, that's going to spark some type of resentment and animosity, which is going to set them against one another. They're targeting gun control. Not gun control to take firearms out of the hands of criminals, but those that are trying to abide by the law, turning them into criminals themselves. Because if they start banning certain firearms, then those that were at one time law-abiding citizens now become illegal, because now they have rights and principles. They believe that no one should be able to dictate to them how they should protect themselves and their family. So now there's so much confusion and animosity in this country that it creates so much negativity that it kills the spirit. And even in the Bible, it talks about how people would turn on one another. They would kill one another. Blood would be wasted in the streets. There would be so much anger and resentment and the cursing of God that many people won't be able to find their way back, but have already set in their hearts and mind to be destroyed. Taking the thought in mind, give me liberty or give me death. But the liberty they're fighting for is not the liberty of freedom. It's the liberty of bondage. The liberty to be able to do any and everything that's against the nature of God. So now you have two forces that have collided, two forces that's fighting against one another to destroy the very foundation of what they perceive as liberty, free speech, or rights. So now, the minority, the Democrats that sit in position, those that created the Klan movement, those that lynched blacks, those that promoted slavery, now they've turned the slaves into weapons. And now the slaves are on one path, tunnel vision, to make their agenda come to pass, and yet in the process destroying themselves. So it's time for people to reset. It's time for people to take time out, stop, and think about where you are, about who you are, about where you're going, about why you're so angry and why do you hate so hard, more so than anything, to the point where mothers are leaving their children behind, fathers are leaving their families behind, men sleeping with men, women with women, people living in a state of confusion. It's time to stop and reset and stop allowing so much negativity, so much hatred, so much animosity, so much violence to fill your spirit. Because negative propaganda is the next revolutionary population reduction. A house divided within itself will not stand. And Americans are destroying themselves. So feedback, tell me what you think. Till next time. I'm fearless.